Chiefs, Texans, Sunday Night Football. Both teams pushing for the playoffs today on Locked On Chiefs and Locked On Texans.
You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
And welcome back to another episode of Locked On Chiefs, Locked On Texans. Thank you for making Locked On Chiefs and Locked On Texans your first podcasts. We really do appreciate that part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. And we are now the number one podcast network in the U.S. We really do appreciate that. So thank you very much for that. Today's episode is sponsored by PrizePicks. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code Locked On NFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. So much to talk about. Both of these teams are going to be trying to push for the playoffs, and we will get into that. But we're going to start talking about, the push for the playoffs, the Texans' defensive line versus the Chiefs' offensive line a little bit later, and keys to win to end this show for both teams. John Hickman from Locked On Texans. John, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great, and I want to say I represent the city of Houston, all Texan fans across the nation, when I say they really want the Kansas City Chiefs to lose Sunday night. They can exercise their demons.
Have it be done with. And that
it
is
can be over with. They
from
close that chapter in that book, man. Every Texas fan across the great state of Texas and across the nation, man. If Patrick Mahomes lose and the Chiefs can walk off that field at home with an L, and Houston goes into KC and get a dub, it's going to be some rejoicing going on in the city of Houston.
And if it doesn't go that way, that'll be a whole different ballgame. But we will talk about that a little bit later on as to how Kansas City could get that done or how the Texans could get it done. Ryan Tracy, my partner from Locked On Chiefs and RGR Football as well. Let's dive into this, guys. You look at this game. This is a playoff atmosphere. This is a atmosphere of you must win for both teams to have a chance at making the playoffs. And the reality for Kansas City, at least, you don't win this game, you pretty much can kiss the playoffs goodbye because you've lost against everybody else that you're going to be facing. But, John, I'll let you talk about the Texans going into this game.
Yeah, same thing, really same feel. Houston right now was in a must-win mode, and that's going to be against Kansas City. That's going to be against the Raiders. It's going to be when they take on Arizona. Any team that they take on in the next 5 games, win now mode. Obviously, we know the history of Kansas City versus the Houston Texans, dating all the way back to the blown 24-0 lead when it was still Deshaun Watson's show. Since then, they've met in the playoffs. They've met in the regular season, and it feels like the Kansas City Chiefs just has their number. Feels a little bit different now, though. The defense has been as great, as marvelous, as phenomenal, as advertised, the number one defense in the NFL. They're doing it, being able to send 4 guys to get after the quarterback. The coverage has been good. The linebackers have been good. They're not scoring a lot of points teams are not scoring a lot of points, on this Texans defense, the number one scoring defense in the NFL. We look at some of the moments this year, 8 sacks versus Josh Allen. Danielle Hunter has a 3.5 sack game. So every area of this defense has made it hard on teams to be successful offensively. And the trend all year has been whatever a team has done well, when they play the Houston Texans, it's not as good. The outlier would have to be James Cook. He ran for a buck and whatever, but the Texans defense are taking away what teams are doing well. And I think when we look at the Kansas City Chiefs, you guys can educate me more, a little banged up up front, not the same explosive offense, though they are still in the fight. What is it that the Kansas City Chiefs have done well this year? And why are they sitting at a spot where they're not in the playoffs? Currently, they're fighting for their playoff spot. What's going on with KC?
Their push is to answer those questions, to tell you the truth, because question one, what have they done well? Well, everything. They just haven't done it at the same time. Defense has been on one game, offense is on another. The special teams is cooking one day, getting out to the 45-yard line, and then next time they're letting it land inside the 5. There's just no consistency, and there's no dedication. There's no identity to this team. This identity has probably come back to, hey, let's play pretty good and hope Patrick bails us out. That's kind of the way that it's been going. And so their push right now is to identify the things. And this team also has a lot in common. They've only allowed 100-yard rusher in this time, and it is that same James Cook. So, like, the defense has the ability to rise. They've got a couple of things they got to watch out for. We're going to talk about some keys to the game here later with the wide receivers and the DBs and those kind of things. But the fact is, the Houston Texans are scrappy. They got that memory from when things didn't go their way, and they're playing from the power advantage at this point, which is scary to say when you're coming into Arrowhead. But for the Chiefs, it's about finding themselves and putting it all together, playing offense, defense, and having the teams not be a thorn in their side. That's what they got to try to put together at home against the Texans.
Yeah, and you look at how this game is going to play out, you have to wonder, when you start looking at it from Kansas City's perspective, like I said, you've lost against Jacksonville, you've lost against Buffalo, you lose against the Texans. Good luck making the playoffs. When you're the Texans, you're in a little bit of a different situation because you'll end up playing the Jaguars again, or you've played them twice, so it's a little bit different. But I do think that this is going to be a huge game for both teams. I mean, both of them have to play well enough to win. CJ Stroud's coming back from an injury. Obviously, he played last week. Hopefully, he will be just fine this week and good to go. And for Kansas City, we're going to be talking about the offensive line injuries that they have here in the next segment. But, the injuries have started to hit them and are hitting them at a very crucial time where they don't win the next 5 games. There's no chance they make the playoffs. And we haven't seen a situation where Kansas City hasn't been in the AFC Championship game since Patrick Mahomes has been the starter at the QB position for Kansas City. So it's just a much different scenario. And Kansas City's won, 9 AFC West divisions in a row, going back to Alex Smith as the QB. So this is a big game for both teams. Really curious as to how it's going to play out.
Pure dominance. No, that's some dominance right there. That's some dominance that Texan fans want to enjoy. Being able to go to conference games as much as you guys have and dominate the division. You know what I'm really interested in? I'm interested into the approach of the defense. Obviously, in the past, there's been what some people may feel questionable calls. And we know Patrick Mahomes, he'll get out that pocket, he'll make something happen. And this year, he's been a great addition to that run game. I think he is second on the team in rushing yards this year, his highest yards per carry in his career. So he's been impactful in that area. But we know the history between Houston, Azeez Al-Shaair, Will Anderson, and the games, the physicality of the game. So I'm really interested into how that's going to play out on Sunday night, because this team hits. Jalen Petrie is healthy; he's back. They hit down here in Houston, and they don't change their approach for nobody. But when you play up against Patrick Mahomes, you got to be smart because of the pass that comes with it.
And that's probably my big question is, do you think at this point that they need to change what they do? Or are you ready to ride the way they've been playing, no adjustments, and just take the Chiefs on a down year and try to knock them out?
If it's me, you don't change nothing, because how you played has gotten you back to the playoffs. How you've played has allowed for you to go on a 4-game win streak. How you played have allowed for you to climb yourself out of an 0-3 hole, now sitting at 7-5. Like, that's crazy. So I guess changing the approach is not necessarily the question. It's just how early in the game does Houston assess Patrick Mahomes' approach, and what the conversations are right now centered around, protecting the team. Can't afford a 15-yard penalty on 3rd and 8 if we're trying to get off the field because of a late hit or because of a roughing the passer penalty. Can't afford those things. So just be smart about how to go about winning on defense. So you don't change the approach, but you do play a lot smarter, simply because Mahomes is still Mahomes and he's going to get some of those calls. And that's one thing that I really worry about for Houston in this game.
I will say I'm going to be curious to see how this plays out, because Kansas City has not been getting some of those calls this year, and the ball's been bouncing the other direction. But when we get back, we're going to be talking about the Chiefs' offensive line that is really banged up and has a ton of injuries versus this Texans defensive front and their defensive line right after this.
This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. You and I make decisions every day, but on Prize Picks, being right gets you paid. Don't miss any of the excitement this sports season, whether you're following the NFL, the NBA, or both. There's no better time to jump into the action. If you haven't tried it yet, PrizePicks is the simplest way to play out there. Just pick more or less on at least 2 players and their stats, what you think, get them right, and you win. It takes less than 60 seconds to make your lineup. You can play anywhere PrizePicks operates, including California, Texas, and Georgia. It keeps every game exciting, and you can get it all during both football and NBA tip-offs and get right there with that stacks feature. It's a new game changer, and it gives you threes, points, touchdowns, etc. Download the PrizePicks app today and use the code LOCKEDONNFL. You're going to get $50 in lineups after you pay for your first $5 lineup. That code again is LOCKEDONNFL for $50 in lineups after your first $5 lineup at PrizePicks. It's good to be right.
All right, Chiefs, Texans, biggest matchup going into this game. And quite frankly, I think it was going to be a big matchup regardless of whether or not Kansas City was healthy. But you lose Josh Simmons for the year. He's out. Well, at least for the next 4 games. He's on IR. Probably going to be without Jawan Taylor and maybe even Trey Smith. So at this point, this is going to be an interesting matchup. John, how do you see it?
Yeah, I see that as a matchup the Houston Texans can win. The last 4 weeks, KC, whether it be by Patrick Mahomes taking a sack with the offensive line, but it's been 13 sacks. During that time span, I mean, you guys played Dallas. Dallas did a good job, I think, in getting after the quarterback. Dallas, I think, is built inside out with how they approach getting after the quarterback compared to Houston, where they're outside in and not a household name in their D tackle room. But those guys are extremely good football players. And because they know that those guys on the outside is going to push everything back towards them, if they don't get them, if Will and Daniil don't get them, then they are always where they need to be. So Tim Settle, I think, has had a great year for Houston. Sheldon Rankins in the second half of this season has been great for Houston. So when we look at like dominating the game, and I'm going to look up the numbers in a little bit, but I would rather, like anybody, you would rather a quarterback have to face third and long than third and short. Well, how do you do that? Early downs, you're looking at Will Anderson, who does a great job playing against the run. Like, there was a conversation of who was better, Will Anderson or Michael Parsons in 2025. And I'm like, guys, Will Anderson stops the run at an incredibly great rate. And so you look at how they can win there and then just forcing some of those second down throws that Patrick Mahomes may like to take. The linebackers got to be where they are, but just getting after the quarterback consistently throughout the game. So that's an area of the game where if we look at key matchups, check for Houston.
So you're saying 40% on offensive line is something you're interested in? Okay, I can tell you that.
I mean, I think the whole city of Houston.
Yeah, I think they'll take it, right? Yeah, okay.
These guys are dealing with injuries.
You're telling me you don't want us to run at Anderson? Okay, well they weren't going to anyway because it's Andy Reid calling the plays, so that's all right. Check. So far, I'm not liking the way this is lining up, John. And I'll tell you this: there's a lot to playing as a front that the Chiefs' offensive line has been pretty good at, especially on the interior. We know that there's been weakness at tackle for a couple of seasons. But to have both of them go out 1 week where the backups have not been getting a whole lot of reps. Jalen Moore has gotten into the game because of the absence of Josh Simmons earlier in the year. But last week, they didn't practice. They didn't get reps with the ones. Now, all of a sudden, they're thrust in there. The Chiefs elevated a practice squad player, Sapole, today because they had to, because they don't have another choice. A guy that got let go by the Jets of all places. So there is a lot that goes into this. So for the adaptation that the Chiefs have to throw with the Texans, it's going to have to be negating the time that Anderson and Settle and Autry have to get to Patrick Mahomes. If they do that, how do you feel about the matchup in the quick game with the DBs, in particular the linebacker level, and trying to get that quick over-the-middle type passes going?
That's a good question. So what helps that second level of the defense out is having Jalen Petrie. Now, one thing we didn't talk about, looking at the storyline, Houston will be down a couple of safeties. So they're going to have to rely on Miles Bryant and also maybe Jalen Mills. We'll see who they call up for game day, but Miles Bryant filled in for Jalen Reed, the rookie, on Sunday. The one player that doesn't get talked about enough, and last week I just kind of had to give him his flowers, Azeez Al-Shaair. This is probably a game he has circled, right? Because in the playoff game, he allowed that big Travis Kelce catch and run that I think maybe he scored on, or he got down there to the end zone, to the red zone, and you guys were able to punch it in. He has played tremendously good this year in coverage. I mean, he's under 9 yards allowed at the linebacker position this year. That's better from last year. Doesn't have the amount of missed tackles. He's communicating well. He's where he needs to be. Not allowing a lot of yak yards. Now, what I am worried about is, okay, how will KC find the matchups to help him? Because Rashee Rice, is he a X factor? Depends on who he plays, but he could be against Houston. Houston has had issues with covering slot guys this year. Everybody knows that. So does Andy Reid. By the way, I'm seeing way too many Chiefs fans want fired. Does he look to utilize Rashee Rice, Xavier Worthy in the slot? That's something that you guys will have to tell me on, and just what's going on with that play calling in the first place for Chiefs fan to feel like that.
It's a great question, and I wish that there was a great answer for it. The problem is there's not. Like, it's execution. It's execution to an extent. It is play calling as well. But I mean, you have scenarios where you have Patrick Mahomes. It's an RPO, and 90% of the time he's throwing the ball versus handing it off when maybe he should. So that kind of plays into it. But then you get into other scenarios, and this is kind of what you referenced early on. Kansas City gets some calls. Well, at this point this year so far, some of the calls have been going against them and have really cost them at some very big times. When you're talking like you get in a situation where it's 1st and 10, you come out and you get I'm not saying it's a bad call, but you get a false start penalty, or you get a holding penalty in those scenarios, and then you get into the 2nd and 3rd and longs, and that is where this offense has really struggled. Is they cannot consistently make up for those types of scenarios. If they can stay in a 3rd and manageable, they're very good at getting first downs and being successful as an offense. But it's the scenarios where you come out on 1st down, you throw either a deep pass or an intermediate, it's incomplete, then you go to 2nd and 10 and you don't feel like you can run the ball. So this offense just hasn't been consistent. And as much as I am not Ryan, who wants to run the ball probably more than 45% of the time, I would be okay with them running it 35 to 40% of the time, but they don't generally even do that. On the games that they have, they've been pretty successful. Look at the game against the Colts where Hunt ran 30 times. They were successful as an offense. So I do think that the running game can help them, and getting Pacheco back is going to help as well. But you look at this banged up offensive line, it's going to be a struggle against a good defensive front from Houston.
Yeah, and I'm looking at the numbers for Pat Mahomes. On 3rd and 7 to 9 yards, 30 attempts, only 5 first downs, 3 sacks, for 47% completion percentage. 3rd and 10 or more, 29 attempts, 6 first downs, 3 sacks, 3 interceptions, 58 completion percentage. That's where Houston has to get them in. And that has to be their formula consistently throughout the game. And one thing that we don't talk about enough when we look at this number one defense, they got a lot of 3 and outs on the year. A lot of 3 and outs on the year. How do you do that? Getting after the quarterback, playing smart football, don't allow for those 15-yard penalties to kick off, be smart with your hands in coverage. And this is one of those games. Obviously, every game, again, is a must-win. But Houston knows how things can go in favor for Kansas City. That may have been in the past, but they don't want to risk it. So I am 100% sure this week DeMeco Ryans has been preaching, let's be smart, let's be physical, but let's not give them anything extra, because if you keep them alive, Pat Mahomes, it may not be playing to the standard that we've grown to see him play at. He's still Patrick Mahomes, and he's still winning some games late.
Yeah, when poor game outputs are 24, 27, 28 points, we know there's still some gas there that you can light. The problem becomes is getting to that point and not getting too cute, and I think that's where the play call parts to come in. And the thing that I do think is bothersome, and you correct me if I'm wrong, because I looked at the stats earlier, and am I right that Derek Stingley in the last 5 games has only been targeted 11 times?
Right. Oh, yeah, you're right.
11 times. So no matter what, the Kansas City Chiefs cannot align themselves to allow him to take half of the field away. This is a prime thing that they cannot let the offensive line dominate, and they cannot let half of the field be written off. So I don't care if you got to run stacks, you got to run switch releases, whatever you got to do. You got to be able to have the whole field available if you were going to be able to move the ball against the Texans.
Now, here's where that matchup, the Derek Stingley versus the passing offense. The last 4 games, Houston 4-0. Jags, who they had out there, receiver, right? Tennessee, who they got out there, receiver. Buffalo, they ain't got nobody at receiver. Indianapolis, okay, well, you got Michael Pittman. You also got Alec Pierce. When they were lined up against Derek Stingley, they didn't do much, but none of those teams have, I think, a receiver as comparable to a healthy Rashee Rice or the playmaker that Xavier Worthy can be whenever he's locked in. And in my opinion, he's been a disappointment 2 years into his career, his young career. So I do look at that matchup and I see how Derek Stingley has played in the last 4 to 5 games and how shut down he's been. But I can see Kansas City trying to test him to see, was it just who he was going up against, or is he just that dude? And a lot of Texan fans and myself will tell you he is that dude. He will try to bait Patrick Mahomes into an interception. That's been his MO. So I'm curious and I'm glad you brought that up. I'm interested to see how you guys in KC go about attacking Derek Stingley, or if you don't at all.
A lot more to talk about when we get into the keys to the victory for both of these teams right after this. So one of the things you talked about, John, before we went to break was the fact that Patrick Mahomes has struggled in 3rd and 7 to 3rd and 10 and long all season this year, which isn't great for most quarterbacks, so I understand it. But the thing I wonder is when you look at how this is going to play out, is one of the things that the Texans can do is maybe give some run stopping looks on first down, trying to force Kansas City to throw the ball on first down to try to get them in a position where it could be a 3rd and long situation. Is that kind of where you're thinking that they could go on defense? And what do you see as your keys to victory for the Texans?
So you are asking me in terms of the looks, could Houston try to force KC to approach each down differently?
I'm looking at it from the perspective of, do you stack the box trying to force Kansas City to throw? Because generally speaking, you would think that wouldn't be what would be smart, but if they've not been successful on first down, then they get to a 3rd and long situation versus a scenario where you go light box on first down and let them throw and dare them to run.
It's a good question, honestly. It's a good question. I think Houston's approach in the first half specifically would absolutely be, let's see what our front four is going to do and how they can change the game on their own. That's been the MO all year. Again, we don't talk about a lot of the D tackles, but those guys have been playing great football. So in terms of being able to stop the run, when you take on Etienne out of Jacksonville, or when you take on a Jonathan Taylor who Houston just played, and how they were able to stop the run, those D tackles had a lot to do with it, keeping him to under 100 yards on the day. Or going into the 4th quarter, he only had 45 rushing yards. So Houston is going to trust their front four to start the game. Now, how they end the game will be completely up until how the matchups is going, the ebbs and flows of the game. I can't speak to that. I will say a key to victory for me, and I've been big on this, right? You guys have watched the 2nd best quarterback of all time play football. And in some people's minds, he's the best quarterback of all time. But you guys know what a dynamic quarterback can do for a roster that may not be like when we look at Philly's roster, especially in the last 3 years, their roster has been very stacked. Certain teams, their roster is stacked. Are the Kansas City Chiefs roster offensively stacked? I wouldn't say no, but why do we trust KC to stay in some of these games? Because they have a dynamic quarterback. I say all that praise to say this. This is one of those moments where CJ Stroud needs to be in that elite version of himself. He needs to be somewhat of elite against Kansas City, right? I think that he has the weapons to do it. You're muted, Chris. I think he may have the weapons to do it.
Please stand up. Sorry.
Dalton Schultz has been playing good football for Houston. Nico Collins, the rookies are starting to come along. But I personally think Houston wins this game, and it could be a statement game if CJ Stroud goes out there and balls out. And that's what I'm looking forward to seeing.
I don't disagree with you. I think he has that in him. I think he has since coming out of college. And it is good to see him get back on that track. As somebody who liked him before my team that I cover had to play him. I still think that there are ways to get to him, and that is moving him off of his spot. I don't think he has to be taken to the ground, but he has to be moved off of his spot so the timing isn't there with those big receivers. The Chiefs had trouble with big receivers this year, and it's because the more physical brand of defense that the Kansas City Chiefs DBs play, they're susceptible after the initial contact, right? So what you have to do is move the quarterback off of his timing. It doesn't necessarily have to put him on the ground, but you got to take away that initial rhythmic throw. And I think CJ is good later in the play, but I do think that he is best when he's able to hit his back foot and come out on time the way that he wants to. And by getting some kind of pass rush. And in particular, I have nothing against anybody that's playing there. It's got to happen. They got to come after the rookie left tackle. They have to do and game plan how they're going to attack Ursery, in my opinion, in order to try to get to CJ and disrupt what he wants to do. That is the key to a win for me.
And I'll say this, to that point, Ursery has been left on an island a lot this year. A lot of us here kind of baffled at it. Now, granted, he's winning a lot of those matchups, right? So I guess you live with it, but you're absolutely right. And also considering what George Karlaftis did last year, you want to give those guys some help out there. But you're right. I'm interested in to see, how he comes along, continue to build on what he's doing. Chris Jones, where is he right now? He's been locked in the last couple of games. And when I started off watching this season, he looked like he was out of it. But I think he can be a factor for the Chiefs, front four, one of the best players on their team. And so Houston up front, I think will have their hands full, but not as much because this offensive line is playing way better football than they did last year when they took on Kansas City. This is a much improved offensive line.
It's interesting because I don't know that I would have ever thought that I would be looking at this season with the way that the Chiefs offensive line started and how it's going to probably be in this game and say this is one of my biggest keys. But one of my biggest keys, Mahomes has to get the ball out in about 2.5 seconds on average throughout this game. If he doesn't do that, this is not going to be a pretty game for Kansas City. They may be able to take a shot or two in this game, but you're going to have to get the ball out quick. You have to get the ball out on rhythm. You can't hold it, and you cannot take sacks against this defensive front, especially on first or second down. On third down, it kills the drive, obviously, but it's not as bad because you're probably going to punt if it's third and long anyway, and you get a sack. But in this scenario, you have to just get rid of the ball. You have to, live to play another down, and you have to get rid of the ball quickly. You cannot give this pass rush a chance to get there. Andy Reid has to have a good game plan for this one, and Mahomes has to be hitting his targets and knowing where he's going with the ball probably before the ball snapped, honestly.
I got to ask y'all, you just mentioned Andy Reid. I know we got to get out of here. Are you guys –
No.
Okay, that's one no, but because I know how y'all seeing it's time to move on from Andy Reid. I've seen it's time to drop him off in the hospice tweets. I've seen some very disrespectful tweets from Chiefs fans this year.
Five Super Bowls in 6 years, and you want to get rid of him as a head coach. Like I'm not gonna say there's things that Andy Reid does that don't drive me flipping batty, crazy sometimes. I think that there's some changes on the coaching staff that need to happen in the offseason. So I do think that that's possible. But when it comes to Andy Reid himself, no, I don't think that he needs to go. I do think we didn't see an Andy Reid that innovated this year like he has in the past, which is kind of interesting to me a little bit. But I do not think that they need to be getting rid of him by any means.
I don't think so either. But I got to tell you this. He got to stop playing with his food. Let's just get after it and eat.
You know what would be scary? By some stretch of imagination, y'all ended up with Jeremiah Love.
Easy now.
I think that would be scary. Lastly, Xavier Worthy, that's my guy, UT. What's going on with him, man? He has all the speed in the world, but it don't seem to translate to consistent moments for you guys. What's going on?
Got injured, third play of the year. Never been the same since. He's been battling. He's a tough kid, but he is not 100% by any means.
Well, and I will say this, like, it's not just Worthy, and I'm not making excuses, but Worthy's not healthy. I don't think Rashee Rice is healthy. Like, he's playing, but I don't think he's 100%. I think he'll be 100% after next, or in going into 2026, but he's not 100% right now. And Worthy, he's been battling an ankle injury, but the other issue that you have is, like, him and Mahomes just have never had the connection. Like, the deep connection has never been there for those two. And until they actually get that figured out, that's going to be a problem. But the other part with him is he can do a lot on the field as a wide receiver. He's not just speed, like a lot of people want to think he is. But the shoulder injury is definitely going to hurt his availability and the different things that they're going to ask him to do, just because they don't want to put him at risk for a worse injury at this point.
Okay.
I'll tell you all about Xavier. I expect him to have surgery in the offseason from that shoulder that happened third play of the year. So it kind of casts a shade on his whole year, to tell you the truth. But he's a bad
Really hope, like you said, I really hope you can battle through it, bounce back. Maybe not necessarily for Sunday. If you can just continue
come on now.
Come on. He needs to be ready for Sunday night and good to go, and have 200 yards. There you go. That'd be good with that.
The ramifications of this game for the entire nation will boil down to this. Whoever wins has bragging rights over who has the best barbecue. Kansas City or Texas. I'm out.
Wow.
I'm out.
I'm going to come visit.
That is John Hickman for Locked On Texans. That is going to be where we're going to end it today, with that controversial take from John. Thank you all for listening. We really do appreciate it. We will be back tomorrow with the preview episode on Locked On Texans and Locked On Chiefs. And thank you all so much again. And we will talk to you tomorrow.